Hey, good morning. How you guys doing this morning? Good. I'll try that again. How you guys doing this morning? That's a little better. Okay. We're going to mix things up a little bit today. I'm going to do a little bit of teaching. So I'll set this up here. So last week was awesome. How many of you guys were here last week for Easter? We had a great gathering. And just saw God do some cool things. We're in this series Sabotage right now, and I'm excited for today. Actually, I told Jeff as we were setting this whole series up, I said, you know what? I think it's like maybe weeks 2 and 3 I'm probably the most excited for out of this series, and so one of those is today, and so I'm glad you're able to be here and be a part of that. We're just going to talk through some things that I think are maybe often misunderstood when we pursue Jesus, when we pursue to know who God is and kind of what he's doing in our life. And so we're going to talk about some of those misunderstandings today a little bit. As we do that, I'm curious, how many of you have been on a mission trip before? Anybody? A couple of you have been on a mission trip? I would strongly encourage you to sign up at the table out there in the lobby to be a part of that DC trip if the dates work out for you. When you go on a trip like that, it really gets you out of your natural setting. It really puts you in a place where you get to know some other people, but it also puts you in a place where you're there not for yourself. You're really there to serve and to give to others. And it's amazing the work that God does in your life. It's amazing the things that God shows you in that process. It's amazing the things that are just able to be accomplished in such a short period of time in our relationship with God and our relationship with others. So I would encourage you to try to be a part of that. It's a great opportunity. We try to do those a couple times a year. With that, I want to show you a video. So take a look at this video, and then we're going to have a little bit of fun with it.
Sometimes I dream that he is me. You got to see that's how I dream to be. Bum, 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 bum.
I dream I move.
I move.
I dream I groove. Like Mike.
If I could be like Mike.
Oh, if I could be like Mike.
Like Mike. If I could be like
If I could be like Mike.
Be like Mike. Be like Mike.
Yeah, I try. Just need to fly.
Just one day if I could be that way. I dream I move.
Oh, I move. I dream I groove. Like Mike.
If I could be like Mike.
I'm gonna be like Mike. If I could be like Mike.
Be like Mike.
Like Mike. If I could be like Mike.
Still got it.
I try to keep things under wraps a lot. That was actually made about me, which is pretty astounding. That Michael Jordan himself would want to be like Mike. But I remember as a kid watching that commercial, the original. I mean, I don't know if you guys have you guys seen that already? Anybody ever seen that? It's a new one. They just came out for like Gatorade's 50th anniversary or whatever. And but I remember being a kid and watching the original. How many of you guys, anybody remember the original? Yeah. All the mics remember the original. And I got a little bit curious about how these companies brand themselves, right? And obviously Nike, this is Gatorade, but Nike used Michael Jordan to do the same thing. And Nike's kind of, I didn't realize this. Did you know that in 1988, Nike was like losing ground and they were like ready to go under? Did you guys know that? I had no idea. And so in 1988, Nike came out with a new slogan. Do you know what it was? Just do it, right? Yeah, come on. And so I didn't know that they were like trying to turn the corner in the market with that, and they actually did. And now they're one of the biggest shoe brands today. So some of the other things that are out there, Have you guys heard of this kind of slogan phrase? It's "a diamond is forever." Do you guys know where that came from? Anybody know where that came from? Not your wife. No, it wasn't actually. No, I was really surprised. It was from 1938. Yeah, 1938. It was from something called De Beers Diamond Company. Has anybody even ever heard of it? All the ladies have heard of De Beers Diamond Company. Astounding. There's another one. Got Milk. You guys have heard of that, right? When do you guys think that one came out? Got Milk. 80s, 90s. It was actually 93. And if you guys remember, they got stars and they had them wear milk mustaches. There's another one here. I was really surprised by this. Where's the beef? You guys have all heard that. Everybody's heard that, right? Did you guys know who that was? Wow, you guys are like really intelligent. It was Wendy's. I didn't realize it was Wendy's. It was Wendy's. And they were trying to poke fun at the competitors for their lack of beef on their burgers, right? But it kind of grew into this whole own thing of itself. This is a great one. I love Awaken and how we can just talk about certain things that you may not talk about it anywhere else. Great taste, less filling. It's beer, right? It's Miller Lite. And I did. Do you guys remember the commercials for that? Anybody remember the commercials? No. Let's do this. I'm going to say great taste, and you're going to say less filling. Okay? Great taste. You say great taste. And I'll say less filling. That's awesome. You know, we're playing out a beer commercial in the middle of Sunday morning worship. That's fantastic. What is wrong with you guys? Serious. But no, it was Miller Lite, and they in 1970s is when this came out, and they were like arguing back and forth about this beer being great taste or less filling, right? And they had to keep up this macho image to sell this beer that was a light beer. And so I thought that was kind of fascinating. I guess you did not. Another one, don't leave home without it. Do you guys know what that is? American Express, right? Yeah, it's still around today. You guys know when that came out? 1975. I won't tell you I wasn't around in 1975. This is a good one. Melts in your mouth, not in your hand, right? M&Ms. I don't even see how that's even true. I have held M&Ms and they melt in my hand. Am I right? I have to go get a wipe. I don't know what I did before kids, but now that we have kids, we have wipes, and so I have to go get a wipe my hand off. So I don't. It's a lie. Do you guys know when that came out? Whoa, World War II. That's fantastic. 1954. Now think about this. M&M doesn't use it anymore, right? What do they use today? They use like those little people M&Ms, right? Think about if they still use that tagline with the little people M&Ms. This little people M&M melting in your mouth. Let's see, what else? I've never heard this. I don't know if maybe some of the ladies here have heard it. Does she or doesn't she? Has anybody heard that? That's close, I guess. I don't know, Maybelline? Clairol? Any ladies heard of that before? It is. Yes. Wow. And I know you weren't born before 1957. You just threw your mom under the bus. All right, another one. You're in good hands with Allstate, right? Do you guys know when that was written? You want to throw some guesses? You're in good hands with Allstate? 2010? Is that what I heard? This astounded me. I just want to use that word, astounded. 1956. 1956, you're in good hands with Allstate. They still use it today. That's amazing. I wish I was the marketer for that. Another one. Burger King, they had a slogan for like 40 years. What was it? Have it your way. Did you guys know they changed it last year? I had no idea. Do you guys know what they changed it to? No. I don't even know why they changed it. Leave it. It's be your way is what they changed it to. But that is dumb, isn't it? No, it's have your way, right? I was curious about some of these slogans. We're going to get back to that a little bit. I promise that we're going to do more today than just talk about marketing slogans. And I promise I'm not teaching about marketing. But I want you to think in your mind. I want you to have that in your mind, this idea of have it your way, okay? I just want you to think about that, how that resonates with us. As we do that, we're in this series called Sabotage, right? And we've talked about last week this idea of doing versus being. This idea that many times we read through the scriptures and we see a lot of these things about doing certain things, right? But we also noted that in the same sermon that Jesus gave, this Sermon on the Mount we looked at just briefly last week, that Jesus talks about these things that we're supposed to do, but at the end of that sermon, he also talks about this idea of being. And we talked about last week how I think that we have a tendency to separate those two things out. Or we have a tendency to look at that and see this tension going on about, am I supposed to do or am I supposed to be? What does that even mean, right? And so last week we looked at this idea and we said, well, our doing should come out of this idea of our being. And none of us chose where we were born, the stories we were born into, the backgrounds that we came from. None of us chose those things. But we talked about last week, how do we celebrate those things that we come from and not feel like to follow Jesus, we have to change all of these things that we do. And so we landed on the idea that Jesus then comes in and he gives us a new being. And that if we try to do these things that we're called to do as followers of Jesus, we're often going to fail. Because the things that we're called to do have to stream out of this idea of being, out of this idea that God makes us into a new creation. And so we talked about all that last week. And this morning, as we move into this, I want us to go back again to Ephesians just briefly. And this whole series you're going to see us building upon this book in Ephesians. I would encourage you through the week to pull out the book of Ephesians and read through it. It's only like 5-6 chapters. And you're going to see just a lot of this stuff come together about who we are as a people. And this whole idea of sabotage is if we don't understand what the scriptures are, and if we don't understand who we are in relation to God, we will often sabotage our lives in the process. Okay? And so this morning, I want us to kind of go back to this idea. We've talked about this in a series before. It was in Awaken Family Values. We did, the first week was about identity. If you're following on YouVersion on your smartphone, which you can get from your program, I attached in there that particular sermon. But in that message, what we said was how we view the scriptures, we have to understand what this is. Many of us will approach the scriptures and say, well, this is a book about what I'm supposed to do. And through that series, we said, no, it's not. And it even goes back to what we talked about last week. If this is a book of what we're supposed to do, then how much of a failure do you feel like? I feel like a big one, right? And because this is more about a story of what God is doing, okay? This is more about a story of God, and God is the centerpiece to this whole story. And the story we had set out in this series, Awaken Family Values, and I'll just briefly mention it today, that the scriptures is a story, then it starts out with this idea of creation, right? And I want you to think about this idea of creation, just real briefly. Everything, God like has this big tapestry, and he sets everything into motion. And unlike you, unlike me, he's able to just call things out and they just move, they come into existence. And everything functions within rhythm and harmony to one another. Okay? And you see God create these majestic mountains. You see God create this beautiful ocean that comes in and goes out, right? And you see You see it through the creation here on earth. You see it through the solar system that we live in, and what we can't even see beyond. But you see this idea of creation and how God has everything functioning, supposed to function within rhythm and harmony to one another. And that was the creation. That's where this story began. But as we move forward, as we move through this story, very quickly we realize, just a chapter in, that everything fell apart. Everything became chaotic. Everything became disoriented. And what brought that disorientation? It was called the fall. What I want to look at today is this idea of the fall and what really took place, what really happened with this idea of the fall. That's what I want us to look at here. Because the fall took place, and it was us turning from God and saying, no, this story is not you at the center. This story is, obviously, it's me at the center, right? Not you, but even just me at the center of the story. I mean, doesn't the world revolve around me? I mean, that whole video was about me, right? Burger King tells me it's about me. Have it your way, Mike. Right? And so this idea of the fall is this idea that the story that God is telling, he's not the centerpiece of this. Are you kidding me? I am the centerpiece of this. But you see, what happened during the fall is all the things that God had created in motion and in harmony and rhythm to itself, what took place, it all self-destructed. You can walk out, turn on the news, and you can see earthquakes here, tsunamis there, storms over here, and we're going to see it throughout the rest of this year, right? We're going to see things take place because it's out of harmony, it's out of rhythm with itself. You yourselves are going to walk through seasons in your life where you're going to feel like things are falling apart. You could wake up today and say, wow, beautiful day today, but tomorrow you may wake up and it feels like things are falling apart. And it's all because of this idea of the fall. That's why we push into these. We call these our rhythms that we live into, healing in, raising up, sending out. Because we as people are called, healing in is about my relationship with Jesus. Because we are called not to be the center of this story, but we are called to let God be the center of the story. And we are a part of what God is doing. So Jesus is that healing in component because he brings healing and freedom and renewal to our lives as we start to understand these rhythms that we're supposed to walk into now, where we are no longer the center of the story. This idea of raising up is this idea that we are to walk together in community. And how many times when we fall out of rhythm do we fall further out of rhythm by isolating ourselves from other people? And those other people that can help us move back to a place of health, right? And sending out is pretty self-explanatory. It's about us investing into people who don't know who Jesus is, and they don't understand that Jesus came to set everything back in the harmony, in the perfect rhythm. And that we are called to be a part of this story where God is the center. Because again, it started with creation. We see this idea of the fall. And last week at Easter, we celebrate this idea of redemption. This idea that Jesus came to set all of this back into harmony, to set it all back the way that God originally intended it to be, to set everything back into a perfect rhythm, into a perfect harmony, where we then allow God to be the center of that story and we move aside because we were never created to be the center of that story. And then if you go back and listen to that message, you'll hear that we move into a fourth part of that story, which is called a restoration. It's called, we are called to be ministers of reconciliation. We've talked about through that series. I would encourage you to go back and listen to some of that. It really pulls out these rhythms. And we don't have time for that today, unfortunately. But the part that I want us to camp on today is this idea of the fall and this idea of redemption and what takes place there. Okay. I would say that as we follow Jesus, there's kind of this upside down part of our faith that we often don't understand. Okay. And to jump into that, I want us to, I think that we first have to understand how much we yearn to be the center of the story. I would say that we are glory hounds. Would you guys agree? You know, I want to be the big dog. Just say it. I want to be the big dog, right? We want to be. We want things to center around us. Even as we leave today, I'm going to go get something to eat, and I want it whose way? I want it my way, right? Don't tell me I can't get it that way. I want it that way. And so we have to understand how much we yearn to be the center of this story, that God is actually the center of the story. And the more we try to push in to be the center of this story, the more that we become uncomfortable at the center of that. The more that we become more and more unfulfilled at the center of that. The more and more that, frankly, our life becomes chaotic and we lose all sense of rhythm, right? But you have to admit, this is pretty awesome. Think about it. Just think about it. This is pretty awesome. We started softball yesterday. This was pretty awesome. I've got 4 kids. They were on spring break this week. This was pretty awesome. Thank God they go back to school tomorrow. I come up here every week and open up the scriptures and help us understand more of who God is, right? I hope. This is pretty awesome. Every once in a while, I'll even get a little chuckle, little laugh, and I'll go, wow, was that funny, sweetie? And she'll go, no, not really. I'll say, curse you. No, not really. But this is pretty awesome, right? But isn't that how we view ourselves? Honestly, we do. Don't we look at ourselves and say, man, I'm a pretty good dude. Well, ladies, you may say something else. But we look at ourselves and we say, you know what, I'm not that bad. I got it together, right? Or we want to give the appearance that I've got it together so others will look at my life and say, wow, he's pretty slick. Or before I met my wife 13 years ago, she would look and say, wow, he's the bomb. Right? I just had to throw that in there. Moving on before I get myself in trouble. But we think we're pretty swell people, don't we? And some of us may be sitting here and we may kind of approach this differently, but I want you to understand it's the exact same thing. Whether I stand here and think to myself that I am pretty naturally a cool dude, most people like me. Those people that don't, well, not everybody can be perfect, right? And so I am pretty slick. Now, others of us may approach it very differently, and we may say, well, you know what, I don't have a lot to offer. I don't know if I'm really that great. You know, I've got this issue and this issue I'm trying to work through. Those are the exact same issues. Do you see that? What is that doing? It is putting, whether I look at myself and say, man, I'm pretty slick, I'm pretty cool, I'm the bomb. Or I stand over here and I say, man, I've got all these things I'm working through, and I'm just, oh man, I don't know if I'll ever amount to anything. All those things is putting me at the center of the story where you and I were never to belong. And we wonder when we put ourselves in that story, why it feels so unnatural. We wonder why, when we're there in the center of that story that God is telling, why it seems so chaotic. Why we wake up one day and God says, don't worry, but we wake up and we're like, man, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And God says, don't worry about tomorrow. I got that, man. You know, and we say, well, I don't think I have to worry about tomorrow. God says, no, don't worry about tomorrow. Be happy. No, that's a different slogan. But you have to understand that we put ourselves in the center of this story where we were never meant to belong. Now, do we got that? I want to move on. Can we all agree with that? I want to move on. I want to show you something here. Because I think that when we start to follow Jesus, what does Jesus have to do? He has to beat that out of us. That may not go well in your theology. But that's in essence what God is doing. He has to beat that out of us. I don't know about you, but there's a lot of beating this boy's had to take. Because I thought I was pretty cool. And God had to show me otherwise. Now, if we're on the same page with that, I want to show you a passage that we looked at just briefly last week. And it's Ephesians chapter 1, verse 18 through 21 here. And the reason I want to look at this is because we said this series is kind of built around these three ideas. It says, I pray also that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, so to know the hope that God has called you to. So you can write that down somewhere. To know the hope that God's called you to. The riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints. To know the inheritance that God has called you to. And then lastly, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. And then it goes on and it says, the same power that raised Christ from the dead now lives inside of you if you follow Jesus. I want you to catch that. Do you realize the hope that God has called you to, where you can wake up and you can say, I'm not worried about tomorrow because I know I'm not the center of this story. God is the center of this story. And there's a hope. There's something in the future God is calling me to. How does that change your frame of reference? How does that change how you live today? And see, it goes back to what we talked about last week. It's this idea of not me just going out and doing these things so God is happy with me, because I could never do enough for God to be happy with me, because I'm really not that cool to begin with, because God is the center of that story. But it's God coming in and changing me, making me a new being, so that as I go out tomorrow, it changes how I think and how I process, because I am no longer the center of the story. And so it's a hope that God is calling me to. It's this idea of an inheritance that's greater than anything you can do now today. And it's this idea of this power that resides within you, that this power to overcome. This power to create new. This power to do things that you never thought possible before. Is this computing? Is this computing? So how do we get to that place where we can understand the hope that God is calling us into, the riches that he's calling us towards, and the power that God has given us? Haha, glad you asked. I think the answer is in Philippians. All that to set this passage up. All that so that I think we can learn something here today that we may sit here and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, but I would say most of us do not live out in our life. I would encourage you to grab something, to write this down, to mark this down, because this will change how you see your faith. And believe it or not, it's in the example that Jesus gave us. Let's get there quick. It's Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. It says, your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. Your attitude should be the same as God. Now, I don't know about you, but last I checked, even waking up this morning, was your attitude like God this morning? Wow, none of you. And I prayed that God would give me some mercy this morning. Give me some people that their attitude would be like him this morning. None of you. Here, just wait a minute. I'm going to pray for some new people, okay? No, I'm kidding. Because none of us, how do we even attain that, right? How do we even attain this place that my attitude is the same as Christ Jesus? Look at this. It continues. it says, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. I want you to understand something. What does it say there? It says that Jesus, as part of this whole idea that is so hard to grasp, so hard to understand, this Trinity idea, Jesus being one of the Godhead, Jesus himself said he did not consider equality with God the Father something to be grasped. Catch that for a minute, guys. What does that mean? That means that Jesus says, you know what? For me to sit on this throne, for me to sit here in this place where I created all your bums, for me to sit in this place and to say, poof, there's a star, and poof, there's the ocean, and poof, there's the rhythm for that ocean to come in and go out, and those waves that you love to sit in on sand and watch the sun go down, and all that stuff Jesus put into motion. He said, you know what? I am going to empty myself of all that right now so that I can come walk among all these bums, so that I can come and feel what it means to be confined within this body, so that I can come and be this place where I'm going to feel the shame of these people, where I'm going to feel the guilt of these people, where I'm going to feel what it means to truly be human. I want you to understand what is the emptyingness that had to take place for God to come here to walk among us scrappy people. Do you catch that? I don't know if I really ever caught that before. Just to be honest with you. For me, this whole idea was like, oh yeah, Jesus came and he kind of died on a cross, and 3 days later he rose again, and the same power that rose him from the dead resides in me, and the Holy Spirit now resides in me and lives through me and helps me with what it means to walk through life and be healthy, and right? I mean, that part of it I think we get. But how many of us really, truly can we say we get this idea that Jesus had to empty himself? He had to come to a place where he said, it's not about me, and I'm going to lower myself to their level. Now, if we sit here and we think to ourselves that, man, I'm pretty cool, I'm the bomb, then that's not that big of a deal, right? But if we truly understand this idea, dude, I'm a loser. And Jesus said, I'm going to make myself a loser to be with you. I want you to understand, what did Jesus do there? Oh, that's nice. That marker doesn't even work. What did Jesus even do there? He emptied himself. He emptied himself. He said, I'm going to set everything aside so that I can walk with these people. He said, I'm going to set everything aside so that I can walk among this chaos. Think about this. God did not create this to be this way, and he said, I'm going to set it all aside to walk among it. Jesus emptied himself. What does that passage say that we're to do? Be the same mind as Christ Jesus, right? So what does that mean we are called to do? What does that mean we're called to do? Man, it got all quiet in here now. What's that? We're called to empty ourselves. Why is it so important that we empty ourselves? Because the last time I checked, when I woke up this morning, I wanted to be the center of the story again. When I go out and I get some food later, I want to be the center of the story again because I want it my way. When I go home later today and my 4 kids are driving my wife crazy because they just got to go back to school, I have a choice to make. Will I empty myself and say, I've got it? Do you see? And that's just minor. That's just so minor. That's just like, it shouldn't even come on the radar, right? It's this idea of emptying ourselves. And I think that for many of us, as we start to pursue Jesus, as we start to understand who God is, maybe it comes from some TV joker that says, oh, God wants to make you rich, and God's going to make you all powerful, and God's going to make you great. You know all that is? You know what that is saying? That's saying you're the center of the story again. And God is saying, no, sir. because you were not created to be the center of the story again. You know, we do the same thing within the church, don't we? We come in and we say, well, I want it to be this way, and I want it to be this way, and I want it to be this way. And God says, wait a minute. Is this about you, or is this about me? Were you created to be the center of your own story, Mike? Well, I guess not. But man, it sure is fun sometimes. Jesus came to empty himself. Do you know why he emptied himself? Take a look at this. This is amazing, guys. It says, and being found, verse 8, in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross. It says that Jesus embodied. I'm going to try to write that so you guys can see it. Embodied. Jesus embodied. So Jesus came, he emptied himself of everything that it meant to be God so he could walk among us, so that he could embody. What did he embody? What does that passage say that he embodied? We're doing a little bit of teaching, a little interaction here. What does that passage say that Jesus embodied? I'll read it again. You have to catch this. And being found in appearance as man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. What does it say Jesus embodied? What's that? I'll read it again. I could stand here all day. I enjoy this. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. What does it say Jesus embodied? Humility. You know, it could have said a lot of things. Think about it. And I sat reading this passage and I thought to myself, why did Jesus choose humility to embody? Why? I mean, it could have said that Jesus embodied power, right? Be like, boom! It could have said that Jesus embodied humor. I mean, I don't know about you, but there are days I wake up and I'm like, I could use a little bit of humor today. So Jesus could have embodied humor, right? Jesus could have embodied, let's see, what else? Jesus could have embodied a spirit of teaching so that he could teach you about God, right? Or it could say Jesus embodied a spirit of doing so that you could do the right things, right? Doesn't say any of that. You guys, if you catch this, this will revolutionize what it means for you to walk with God. He embodied humility. I mean, it could have said that he embodied Jeff's cat, right? Not my cat. Ugh, I don't like cats. Jeff's cat. I don't know why, just for the heck of it. It could have said a lot of things, but it says that Christ Jesus embodied humility. This is the God of all creation. This is the God who created you. This is the God who set the waters in motion, the God who set the mountaintops, the God who knows the smallest piece of organism that lives that we don't even know exists. This is a God who can count the hairs on your head. This is the God at the end of the day who has all power to wipe everything out and say, I'm done with this mess. This is the God who says, I will empty myself of all of that and now embody humility. What is that telling us? At the end of the day, it's reminding us we are not the center of the story. It's reminding us that we can go to church. We can go and do these things that resemble Jesus. We can go on this missions trip to D.C. and help these people. We can go do all those great things. But at the end of the day, what is it that God is trying to truly do within our lives? He's trying to empty us. Because me, left to my own natural self, I want to be like Mike. And I want all y'all other selves to be like Mike. Because at the end of the day, I'm pretty cool. So it says Jesus emptied himself. He embodied humility. He emptied himself of everything to walk with us. He embodied humility. And then see what takes place. Therefore God exalted him. The Father exalted Jesus to the highest place, verse 9, and gave him the name above all names, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. What does it say he did? He emptied himself. He embodied humility. And it says the Father exalted him to the highest place. I don't know about you. I don't like to empty. Because empty means I can't go in tomorrow the same as I was today. And I've seen this time and time again as we begin this new revolutionary idea of what it means to know Jesus. Many of us begin that relationship with this God of the universe that at one point seemed like I was just supposed to do these things, but there's this revelation that happens, and we realize, no, it's the grace and mercy of God in my life, right? But as we set out on this course, whether again it's these TV jokers or this stuff that we've heard from years ago, whatever it is, the people around us, whatever it is, we think that following Jesus means that my health gets better, that my wallet gets thicker, and that my life just gets great. And when things start to fall apart around us, we start to say, well, wait a minute, God, that's not what I signed up for. And we kind of tell God this, don't we? We kind of, whether it's verbally or just in our actions, we tell God, and we say, God, unless you will make me the center of that story again, unless, God, you will thicken my wallet, unless, God, you will make my health better or the health of my children better, unless, God, you will do these things in my life, I denounce you. We all do it. But you know what I think God is doing at the center of all that? He's emptying us. He's saying, what you have today ain't going to get you into tomorrow. It can't go along for the ride. It's got to change today. Jesus says, I have to empty you. You fill in the blank. Because that blank leads you to the center of the story. Because we need to embody this place where, no, Jesus is the center of this story. We see it all the time, right? Whether it's a job promotion or for me, God was calling me into something new to help with other church planners in our area, right? And I walked through this season of struggle for like the last year and a half of saying, Jesus, the things that I'm good at, I'm not good at counseling. I'm not good at like managing something. The things that I'm good at is like starting something. The things I'm good at is meeting new people. The things that I'm good at are like these new things, right? And as a pastor in a church, God, I can't do all of this like counseling and organizing these people, and I just am not good at all that kind of stuff. And so I went through this season of saying, Jesus, what are you doing in me? What does this even mean? What does this even look like going forward? My passion is to help these guys plant these churches. My passion is that here in Awaken we expand into new areas. We meet new people. We see the gospel reach a new group of people. That's my passion, God. What does that even mean? And you know what God said? God said, I've got to empty you of some stuff first. Yes, Mike, you're right in all that you just said. That is who I created you to be. And we're going to talk about that next week. But in order for me to use you, right, exalt, not exalt me, but exalt Christ through me, for Christ to use me in the natural way he's gifted me and inclined me to be used. In order to exalt me to that place, he has to empty me first. So that I realize at the end of the day, I try to make this shortcut, don't I? I try to make that shortcut. And Jesus says, no, I can't have anything of that, because that shortcut puts you back at the center of my story. My time is up. I just want to show you one last verse. It's in James. As the band comes up, I want to show you this last passage. I want us to understand this idea. The story that God is telling, you are not the sinner. It's not about being like Mike. It's not about having it our own way. We were never made to be the center of this story. And the more that we fight to be the center of this story, and the ways we fight that, guys, it's through my security, it's through my comfort, it's through the idols that I carry in my life. And they're not idols of wood that we made and carved up. They're idols of me having respect. It's idols of me having power. It's idols of me having security. It's idols of me having comfort. It's idols of me having it my way. And Jesus says, the work that I want to do in you, I've got to strip all that away. All that you created, that you brought into this relationship, I've got to strip that away. Those are the things that make you do the things that you don't want to do. We talked about last week. I love James chapter 1. It was written to a people similar to us, I believe. It was a very blue-collar people. It was a new group of people following Jesus, as many of us are new and young. And it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds." There's no LOL after that. We consider it pure joy because we understand. I lost my board. We understand that, you're good. We understand that Jesus is emptying us. They really want me off here. Because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded and unstable in all he does. I would encourage you to take a look at that passage. That passage is about the emptying work that God has to do in our lives so that we can truly understand what it means to embody the nature of Jesus, so that we truly understand what it means to walk in humility, what it means to truly understand that you and I are not the center of God's story. And if I can confess anything to you today, I think that is the hardest thing for me to do. I like to be the center of my own story. I like to have the control. I like to have the power. I like to call the shots. And I'm guessing many of us are the same way. And the work that Jesus has to do in us is he has to empty us of those things. And the seasons that we walk through that are difficult are the same seasons that James talks about here when he says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you walk through trials of many kinds." The reason he can say that is he knows that it's the emptying that has to take place, where Jesus becomes the center of our story again. And we truly understand what it means to walk in healthy rhythm with him of healing in, raising up, and sending out. The band's going to continue to lead us in worship, and as they do that, I would encourage you to just call out to God. It's amazing the worship that comes out of our mouths, because we walk through the week and we can find ourselves worshiping many other things because we were created to worship. I would encourage you to use this next couple of minutes to refocus ourselves, to regather ourselves, and to say, Jesus, I need to worship you and you alone. Make a correct course and see how Jesus is emptying us, because he's calling us to a hope. He's calling us to inheritance. And he's calling us to this life that is powerful. Let's continue to stand and worship.